Detachment is not what you think it is. It is not silence filled with pain. It is not pretending you don't care while your heart is still chasing. It is not ignoring your SP while secretly checking your phone every 5 minutes, hoping, waiting, wondering. That is not detachment. That is attachment, wearing a mask. True detachment is something deeper, something quieter, something far more powerful. Detachment is becoming. Becoming who? Becoming the version of you who no longer needs to be chosen, because you already feel chosen. Becoming the version of you who no longer waits for love, because you are already living in it. Becoming the version of you whose inner world is so full, so certain, so grounded, that the outer world has no choice but to mirror it. Because the truth is this: your SP is not responding to your actions. They are responding to your state. You can ignore them all day. You can stop texting. You can disappear from their life physically. But if internally you're still saying, "Why aren't they choosing me? Do they miss me? What if they move on?" then nothing has changed. Because in the mirror, you are still the one waiting. Detachment begins the moment you stop trying to control the reflection and start becoming the source. This is where most people get it wrong. They think detachment means, "I will pull away so they can come closer." But that is still manipulation, still effort, still coming from lack. Real detachment says, "I no longer need to pull away, because I already have what I desire within." And that shift changes everything. Because now, you are not watching your SP. You are not reacting to their silence. You are not trying to decode their behavior. You are becoming someone new. Someone who wakes up and doesn't feel incomplete. Someone who moves through the day without checking for validation. Someone whose inner conversations are no longer filled with doubt, but quiet certainty. You start thinking differently. Instead of, "They are distant," it becomes, "They are mine. It is done." Instead of, "They haven't texted," it becomes, "There is nothing to fix." Everything is unfolding. Instead of chasing movement, you rest in knowing. And this is the part that feels almost unreal. The moment you truly detach, not by force, not by fear, but by becoming, your SP begins to shift. Not because you ignored them, not because you played a game, but because the version of you they are reflecting has changed. Remember this deeply. Your SP is your mirror. And mirrors do not respond to what you do. They respond to who you are. So if you are still trying to act detached, you are still operating from the old self. But when you become detached, you no longer need to act. You no longer need to convince. You no longer need to wait. Because in your inner world, it is already done. And life has no choice but to catch up. Detachment is not ignoring ... It is not running. It is not suppressing how you feel. Detachment is the quiet decision to stop identifying with the version of you who is not chosen and fully step into the version of you who already is. So the question is no longer, "How do I make my SP come back?" The question becomes, "Who am I being?" That they must reflect. Because once you understand this, you stop chasing love. And you start becoming it. And when you become it, you don't lose people. You transform the way they show up. Because the mirror has no choice, you do not attract what you want. You attract who you become. And this is where detachment reveals its true power. Because becoming is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not chase results or beg for confirmation. Becoming is internal. It is the silent shift where you stop asking, "Where are they?" and start living as, "They are already here." This is the part most people resist, because becoming requires you to let go of the old identity, the version of you who checks, the version of you who waits, the version of you who feels like love is something outside of you, something you must earn, chase, or prove yourself worthy of. Detachment asks you to release that version, not slowly, not halfway, but completely. and step into a new state. A state where your SP is no longer the center of your emotional world, but a reflection within it. Think about that. When your SP is the center, you're always reacting. Reacting to texts, reacting to silence, reacting to presence and absence. But when you become the center, everything else responds. This is why detachment feels like peace. Because you are no longer pulled in different directions by external movement. You become still, grounded, certain, and in that certainty, something almost mystical happens. You stop needing evidence. You no longer wake up looking for signs. You no longer interpret every action your SP takes. Because deep within you, there is a quiet knowing. It is already done. And that knowing is not forced. It doesn't come from repeating affirmations while feeling anxious. It doesn't come from pretending. It comes from embodiment, from living as the version of you who already has what you desire. So your inner conversations change. You are no longer asking questions filled with doubt. You are no longer replaying old stories. Instead, your mind becomes a place of fulfillment. You hear them choosing you. You feel them loving you. You experience the relationship internally, and because the outer world is nothing but a mirror, it must reflect it. But here is the deeper truth most people are not ready to hear. Detachment is not just about getting your SP. It is about freeing yourself from the need to be validated by anything outside of you. Because even if your SP showed up right now, if you are still the version of you who doubts, fears, and clings, you will lose yourself again? That is why becoming comes first, always. You do not detach to get them. You detach to become someone who cannot be shaken, someone who does not lose themselves in love, someone who does not beg for attention, someone who does not confuse silence with rejection. And from that place, love becomes different. It is no longer heavy. It is no longer uncertain. It is no longer something that controls your emotions. It becomes natural, effortless, certain. And this is when your SP feels it, not because you told them, not because you forced anything, but because your energy is no longer asking. It is declaring. There is no pressure, no urgency, no neediness, just presence, just knowing, just being. And people always respond to that. Because certainty is attractive, wholeness is magnetic, and the version of you who is already fulfilled is impossible to ignore. So if you are trying to detach, do not ask yourself, how do I stop thinking about them? Ask yourself something deeper. Who would I be if I already had them? How would I feel if nothing was missing? How would I move if I knew it was done? And then become that. Not for a moment, not as a technique, but as your identity. Because the truth is, detachment is not an action you perform. It is a self you step into. And once you step into it, you don't go back to chasing. You don't go back to doubting. You don't go back to needing. Because you realize something that changes everything. You were never trying to get love. You were trying to remember that you are love. And once you remember that, the mirror has no choice. It reflects you. When you finally stop chasing, you discover nothing was ever running from you. And that realization, it shifts something deep within you. Because now, detachment is no longer something you're trying to do. It becomes something you understand. You begin to see that all along, the struggle was never about your SP. It was never about timing. It was never about distance, silence, or circumstances. It was about identity. Who you believed yourself to be in relation to love. Because the version of you who feels abandoned will always find reasons to feel abandoned. The version of you who feels chosen will always see evidence of being chosen, and the mirror will faithfully reflect both. This is why becoming is everything. Because you cannot force a different reflection while holding on to the same self. So detachment deepens. It moves beyond surface level letting go and becomes a quiet inner shift where you no longer argue with reality. You no longer say, "But they're not here, but they haven't called, but nothing has changed," because you understand something most people miss. Reality does not create. It confirms. It confirms what has already been accepted within you. So instead of reacting to what is, you become loyal to what you have decided is true. And that loyalty is where your power lives, not in forcing thoughts, not in suppressing emotions, but in gently, consistently returning to the version of you who already has it, even when the outer world looks the same, even when nothing seems to be moving. You remain, you stay anchored, you stay aligned, and slowly, something begins to dissolve. The urgency fades, the anxiety softens, the need to figure it out disappears, and in its place, peace, a deep, unshakable peace that does not depend on texts, calls, or validation, because now you understand. What is yours does not need to be chased. What is yours does not need to be forced. What is yours responds to who you are being. So you stop asking, "When will it happen?" and you start living as it is already happening. And this is where detachment becomes magnetic, because you are no longer emitting the energy of lack. You are no longer trying to get something. You are simply expressing a state of completeness. And completeness attracts, not because it is trying to, but because it is whole. And here's the subtle shift that changes everything. You stop watching your SP for movement, and you start noticing your own transformation. You notice how calm you've become, how steady your thoughts are, how you no longer spiral the way you used to. You notice that your happiness is no longer fragile, and that is the real manifestation. Because once you become stable within yourself, the outer world has no unstable version of you to reflect anymore. So it adjusts, naturally, effortlessly, without force, and suddenly, messages come when you least expect. Conversations feel different. Energy shifts in ways you cannot explain. But by then, you are no longer surprised, because you already knew. You already became the version of you where this is normal. And this is the final truth about detachment. It is not about losing desire. It is about losing desperation. You can still want your SP. You can still desire love. You can still imagine, feel, and enjoy it. But you no longer need it to feel complete, because you already are. And when you reach that place, you don't cling. You don't chase. You don't fear loss. You simply allow. Allow things to unfold. Allow people to show up. Allow the mirror to do what it has always done. Reflect you. So if you feel like nothing is changing, don't look outward. Look inward. Ask yourself honestly, am I still waiting? Or have I already become? Because the moment you truly become, there is no waiting. There is no wondering. There is no lack. There is only knowing. And from that knowing, everything follows. Because detachment was never about letting go of them. It was about finally holding on to yourself. You don't lose people by detaching. You lose the version of you that needed to lose yourself to keep them. Now let's go deeper, in a completely different direction, because there's another layer to detachment that most people never confront, and it's uncomfortable. Detachment will expose your addiction to emotional intensity, not love intensity. The overthinking, the checking, the highs when they text, the lows when they disappear, the constant emotional swings that make you feel alive. Many people call that love, but it isn't. It's instability, and your mind gets used to it. So when you start detaching, when you stop reacting, stop chasing, stop feeding the old patterns, something strange happens. It feels quiet, almost empty. And this is where many people panic. They think, why do I feel numb? Why does this feel boring? Did I lose feelings for my SP? No, you didn't lose feelings. You lost chaos, And if you are not careful, you will try to recreate that chaos just to feel something again. You will check their page, reread old messages, trigger old emotions, not because you miss them, but because you miss the intensity. This is why detachment requires awareness, because you must learn to sit in peace, without mistaking it for emptiness. Peace is not loud. It does not rush. It does not create urgency. It simply is. And your nervous system has to adjust to that. So becoming is not just mental. It is emotional retraining. It is teaching yourself that love does not have to hurt to be real. It does not have to be uncertain to be meaningful. It does not have to be dramatic to be deep. And this is where your power expands even further, because now you are no longer drawn to inconsistency. You are no longer attracted to mixed signals. You are no longer impressed by breadcrumbs, because you have experienced something better within yourself, stability. And once you taste that, you cannot unsee it. So even when your SP shows up again, you meet them differently. You don't rush. You don't overgive. You don't lose yourself trying to secure their presence. You observe. You remain grounded. You allow, because your identity has changed. And here's the deeper insight. Detachment doesn't just change how they see you. It changes what you are willing to accept. That is powerful, because before, you may have tolerated confusion. You may have accepted inconsistency. You may have stayed in situations that drained you, just to feel close to them, but now you recognize your value without needing them to confirm it. And that shifts the entire dynamic, because the mirror can only reflect the standards you hold within. If you internally accept less, the outer world will show you less. If you internally know your worth, the outer world rises to meet it. So detachment is not passive. It is not sitting back and hoping. It is an active inner decision. I no longer align with anything that makes me feel small.